talked about this. Good afternoon. I am going to be joined by an awesome panel, but first, a couple of excuses. I was up until 5 a.m. watching the destruction of Colombia. I mean, we took them apart, as far as I'm concerned. 1-1. And as an Englishman, I get to talk about one of my favorite topics, the weather. There's about 3 people who got that. Anyway, so can I just invite on stage, firstly, Jan, who runs our NetSuite application product set, and we'll hear much more about what that technology looks like and sounds like. Leon, why don't you come up as well? SoCar, but an amazing track record in Uber for the last 4 years. My favorite bit of research around SoCar is it shares an acronym with the state-owned oil company of Azerbaijan. So we may ask you a couple of questions about oil. And then lastly, but no means leastly, Mellissa, come up. Mellissa has an amazing CV. K-Fit, Cow Talk, Accenture, a handful of other things. And I'm sure eminently, perfectly placed to talk us through the cloud. So when I was first discussing moderating this particular panel, I was genuinely surprised that we're still talking about whether or not people are going to the cloud. Like, I am just mind-boggled that for the last 10 years, we've been talking about cloud technology, the opportunities that it presents, and everything statistically. Even earlier this afternoon, we had Jungle's David talking about how 78% of all companies in Southeast Asia are going to be on the cloud by 2020. It's a given, as far as I'm concerned. So one of the things I want to explore today, and perhaps you guys can add to it from a Slido perspective as well, is what on earth is stopping every one of you being on the cloud already, scaling it up, and actually doing what we've said in the title, actually disrupting. But before we get into the meat and the potatoes of this particular conversation, I'm going to give our panelists like literally 20 seconds to just describe who they are and what their companies are, and then we'll get into the rest of the conversation. Mellissa, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Mellissa, and I am the country manager for GetResponse. So why this is relevant to us is that we're a cloud-based solution. Obviously, we operate in the realm of email marketing, so our solution is very much on the cloud, and our clients therefore are. So.
Kept within the 20 seconds, thank you. Leon? Okay. Beat that.
So we have 20 seconds, right? Yeah. All right, so for those of you might think that I work for a oil company that's based in Baku, I actually don't. SoCar is a car-sharing app in Malaysia where you can open up your phone, upload your driver's license, book a car using an app, unlock the car using the same app, and start driving. And the reason why we're here today is we actually use NetSuite to manage our expenses. And as a car-sharing company that provides people an all-in-one driving solution, having a solution like NetSuite has actually made some parts of our lives easier. And I'll kind of touch upon that a bit later.
A message from our sponsors. Thank you for that, Leo.
Exactly.
Jan?
More than 20 seconds, but well worth it. All right, so my name is Jan Pabellon. Not a lot of people know this, but I was actually a former entrepreneur. But my entrepreneurial journey ended more than 10 years ago. I joined corporate, worked at NetSuite, work at NetSuite now, so I've been with the company for more than 8 years, where I manage the product aspect of the operation, and basically what I do is I make sure businesses in this region are using and are successful on our product.
So Jan, Larry was obviously very smart. He invested in NetSuite, and then he got Oracle to buy it a couple of years ago for 9-point-something billion US dollars. So he got his own income in there first, and then he went on. So he obviously saw what the opportunity is. Tell me a little bit more about NetSuite, a plug from our sponsors. Born in the cloud, 20 years old, what else?
So actually, NetSuite was actually an early pioneer back in the day when it wasn't called cloud. So back in the day, they called them ASPs, application service providers. Then SaaS, software as a service. Now they are using the term cloud. And so we were an early pioneer. The big idea from NetSuite, our founder, the big idea that our founder had, Evan Goldberg, was basically offer the benefits of what the consumer internet is bringing to many individuals and bring that to businesses. Basically, provide a unified platform for that it's automatically upgraded, it's always available anywhere, everywhere, and use that for to run your business. That's essentially the big idea.
And you've been waiting for 20 years for people to actually get on this cloud thing, right?
Right.
So,
It took a while, yes.
and I really want to explore that today because, again, just amplifying the point I made before, I'm genuinely surprised this is still a topic for, a bleeding edge conference like Wild, that we're still talking about trying to get onto the cloud. And I'll ask my cloud users in a second what's stopping that in their opinion. But Jan, you must be trying to sell to companies the whole time. Move to the cloud, move to the cloud, move to the cloud. What is stopping them?
Well, so when we began this journey, so initially a lot of, so back then the concept of, running your applications, putting your mission critical data out into the internet was a scary idea, right? So they were concerned about security, they were concerned about, control. Now, over time, all of that concern has gone away as everything, everything that we do now runs out of the cloud. When we access a mobile application, when we reach out to our friends, when we manage our bank accounts, it's all via the cloud. So all of that has kind of gone away, but those were the initial concerns when we were starting out.
Mellissa, you're on the cloud, but not all of you is on the cloud.
Well,
Why isn't all of you on the cloud?
Most of us. We advocate this, right? Because we are selling a cloud-based solution. But the reality is that as a company, to be honest, we are not utilizing the full suite of cloud services that we should, right? Even simple things like adopting like Office 365 or Google Apps, right? It took maybe only in the past 2 years for us to do that. So everything was actually operating very offline, even for a tech company, which is quite surprising.
Not a priority or other things?
I think
worry
it's
about?
just because things were working the way they were, right? It wasn't broken, so we didn't have an urgent need to fix, which is what a lot of our customers tell us as well, right? It's not broken, fix it, maybe give me 2 years, 3 years. I know I should be on it, but I don't really see a pressing need to right now.
And that's changing? Leon, I'm going to get to you in a second, but is that changing right now?
Yeah, because we work with a variety of companies here in Malaysia specifically, from startups to even large conglomerates to telcos to even banks right now. So a lot of them were initially, keeping their data on a server in their office, in the back room, and they felt very secure about that. But I think they're starting to slowly see the benefit of being on the cloud. Right? But it took us 2 years, right, to close one contract with one of those large conglomerates.
Boo hiss. Leon, a lot of typical myths that sit around the clouds, data sovereignty, security, integration to legacy. What would you say were the major concerns that you might have or did have before you did move to the cloud?
Well, I wouldn't say these are concerns that we had, but being kind of operators in the mobility ecosystem, many of the agencies that we work with that hold personal data such as driver's license data, such as traffic summons data, many of these agencies actually have concerns, right, over issues such as sovereignty or data security. But what many people actually aren't familiar with is the idea of a cloud being kind of multi-tenant, right? Basically having your data actually stored in different pieces in kind of different data centers all around the world, which in fact actually makes it a lot more secure for your data to be hosted across a multi kind of tenant architecture rather than not. I think for us as a business to kind of scale across multiple cities, across multiple countries eventually, what is actually really interesting and what cloud allows us to do is actually build our tech on what we call a kind of service-oriented architecture, or kind of microservice architecture where just using simple APIs, we can easily launch new services, new countries, work with third-party apps, and that's actually part of the key benefits why we actually moved on to the cloud. And as I talked about the previous kind of security concerns, I think those are largely, concerns that, arise because people don't fully understand how the cloud works. Right?
No,
and there's also an idea of a private cloud.
But there's a lot of people, and we probably should double click on what those people mean, right? Because there's the decision makers within companies, there's the potential clients who might use your platform, and then there's government and ecosystem and regulation. Is that, security's been dealt with. Is that thought the same across each of those different peoples?
Yeah, I think part of it is decision makers. I think the other part is also in terms of implementation what it means to move away from kind of having your own servers to moving completely towards the cloud. What it makes in terms of what it means in terms of internal stakeholder management. Imagine you've been a company who's had an entire team hired just to look after your own internal infrastructure. What does it mean for these guys, right? It means people losing jobs. It's not an easy decision.
No, exactly. And as someone who is looking to make those decisions easier, Jan, what is the hardest sell into a client?
Right. So that's typically one of the questions we get. Like, what do we do with our people, right? So when we make this investment in you in your cloud solutions, like, will that mean that we will have to let go of our people? And that's typically one of the myths surrounding cloud, right? So it actually allows, what we tell our customers, what we tell businesses we talk to is actually actually helps your people. It allows them to kind of focus on things that actually add value to the business instead of spending time on things that, just keeping the lights on things that actually cost you money and doesn't really, at the end of the day, doesn't add value to your customers.
I think that's a pretty interesting analogy when you talk about, repurposing labor for obviously different purposes. If I kind of draw parallels to the mobility industry, I think a big talk nowadays is all about autonomous driverless cars, right? That wouldn't be possible without the cloud, right? Because of the sheer amount of information that needs to be processed. That's why Google recently at its, one of its summits talked about the launch of the new kind of tensor processing unit, which allows for new kind of machine learning, AI tools to be processed at way more powerful processing speeds, which helps their drivers technology such as Waymo, right? But I think an interesting question here is, as more and more companies embrace the cloud, right, including technologies just as, such as driverless tech, what does it mean for people who eventually get repurposed, such as drivers eventually, and what does this mean for the entire, labor ecosystem? I think that's a question that, we would love to explore.
So that has to be a panel at next year's Wilds, where we focus on the future of workforce and the automation and whether or not we tax robots. Right? That's the future. That's how we go about this. So look, let's extol the cloud a little bit as well, right? So we did some research. We try to work out what the cloud actually means from an infrastructure layer all the way through to a platform or an application layer. And frankly, there's so much jargon that as a consultant, I'm like a happy man, right? There's all these acronyms that we can apply and all that sort of stuff. Mellissa, how did you get educated on the cloud? How did you get the team and everyone else at GetResponse, or was it always part of the DNA out of Poland? Because you are a team of geeks, according to the website.
We are in HQ at least, but when we started hiring the team locally, the whole concept was completely foreign to even the most senior of hires that we made. I was exposed to it because I've always been in the startup scene. I've seen new technologies. I'm always around it. These companies adopt new technologies a lot faster. But I think that, based on my experience when I deal with customers right now, or when I deal with prospects, is that the issue is that they don't actually know whether they're allowed to or not. So you have regulation in place in Malaysia, for example, that's almost 10 years old. It's super outdated, and it states that your data can only reside in Malaysia, for example. But there's obviously covenants and caveats to that, but they don't know it, and to them that is that, and I don't know what else, and that's all I have to follow, right? We obviously work with startups as well who understand the cloud a little bit more. Through events and blah, 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 and so on. But my point being that there's still so much gray area that people, I think, number one, don't even understand what we're talking about when we say the cloud, and then we tell them, okay, so your data doesn't sit in a server in your back office. And they're like, oh, no,
Is that what it is?
Yeah. So we break it down to that, and they're like, what do you mean? It's floating out there where? And I'm like, in the cloud. It's a foreign concept, and the whole term cloud doesn't actually add much merit as well because it's fluffy and it's white, and you think of something that's intangible that's floating in the sky. But we do try and break it down. And for us, it's the most basic because we are not dealing with super sensitive data, right? Like banks deal with very sensitive data. Insurance companies, telcos deal with super sensitive data. We're dealing with contact information, which is sensitive but not to an extreme. And even then, people don't want to trust something that's floating in the sky, much less with, can you imagine transactional data or anything like that?
Leon, presumably you've got one or two credit cards as well as part of your data set.
Oh, yes, I do.
Do customers still worry about that? Is it now ingrained in the consumer world that actually if there's a pure play digital business, then they've got all that squared away?
I think the good news is, if we're talking about a payments ecosystem, we have very established players such as PayPal, which, similar to Oracle, have made acquisitions, into new players that specialize in, keep making sure that your data is kept safe, that PCI compliant, that also ensure that they meet the requirements of the local regulator. So for example, we work with Braintree, right, at SoCar. Previously at Uber used to work closely with Braintree as well. And these are kind of proven systems that are able to deal with high volume of transactions, provide a seamless user interface, while at the same time keep secure, make sure that your data is actually secure, right? Both in terms of credit cards. And what many consumers don't know is that your full credit card details actually don't get exposed to us. Rather, it's the actual payment gateway provider that's meant to actually keep your data safe. Right, and we want to talk about the benefits of, kind of cloud versus in-house internal solutions. I think a very easy analogy is kind of convincing people that you can convert the capex into opex. Right, and I think it's that same business model, philosophy, and benefits that has translated to so many kind of sharing services actually taking off. Right, because essentially by moving on to cloud services, right, we're saying, hey, convert your capex into an opex. Let the people who are good at managing data, let the people who are good at keeping credit card details safe, do what they're good at, and we continue just focusing on what we're good at.
Yeah, which is interesting, because it's a bit of a conundrum, right? It's a chicken and egg situation, which is, to Melissa's point, it might not be high on our priority list, but actually it ought to be, because it's detracting away from your focus on the core business, right? So all the time you're managing on-premises equipment or whatever it might be, you've got OPEX in the form of payroll being used to look after all of that stuff, as opposed to just getting on with the core products and the business. And we've heard a lot about that over the last couple of hours, about how important it is just to focus on that and leave everything else behind. Jan, I'm acutely aware that if I go onto your website, your competitors' websites, and everyone else's websites, they hit every single button. We are seamless, we are scalable, we are extensible, we are secure. True?
Well, they'd love to say that, right? But of course, not all. We'd love to say that not all cloud providers are equal. Obviously, a lot of vendors are claiming that they're a cloud solution, that they have they're able to offer the same benefits as a cloud solution, even though they're not. Obviously, we'd love to say, we beg to differ. We are literally born in the cloud. When we say born in the cloud, when we made architectural decisions, when we designed our product, from day one, we designed it to run on the internet. We designed it to run at internet scale, at cloud scale. We designed it to be multi-tenant, so that we're more efficient in our infrastructure, and then we're able to pass on those cost savings to our customers. We have a subscription-based, pricing. We were able to offer, automated upgrades, which a lot of these vendors don't, they don't tell their customers that, you know what, you'd still have to manage all of these systems. It's just in a data center outside of your control, but you're still responsible for updating it, upgrading it, managing the licenses around it, and so on. So these are some of the things that kind of glossed over when some vendors offer their solutions.
Sure, and a lot of the proof of that is in the customers who get to choose whatever the platform is. So perhaps a question from a prospective customer: how would you choose your cloud provider, Mellissa?
I think for me, personally, depending with kind of business I'm running and the data that I'm handling, security is number one. Like what Jan mentioned as well, a lot of these solutions nowadays, it's very easy to build a tech solution or a cloud solution. I can do it in a week or less. But when you talk about security, you have to actually go deep dive into, for example, are they bound by which regulation, which country's regulations? Like for us, we're bound by the laws of the US, the laws of the European Union, which is super strict on data privacy. Are they bound by any global sort of international standards? There are a lot out there, like ISO this and ISO that. And most of the big ones are, right? But a lot of these smaller players, they come along and they offer you at a cheaper price something that can be executed maybe tomorrow. But security is still a big concern for me personally, and I look at cloud providers. Yeah, so I would definitely look at that, where their data centers are located as well. I've actually had companies that we've spoken to, and they tell us specifically exactly where their data centers are, which I'm very uncomfortable with, because I can tell you my data centers in the US, but I shouldn't tell you the exact address. Of course, subject to DDoS attacks, blah, 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 and so on. So it's a security thing as well. Yeah.
And as someone who's chosen, Leon, how did you choose?
I think cost consideration is always primary, right? Especially for a company in the growth phase. But I think the other two key factors that we look at is obviously scalability of the platform and how much customization can be done. I think some of the key issues sometimes to do with, kind of cloud-based products or services is that it's not very easy to customize, right? Or they won't necessarily do it for a kind of small player such as, myself. But I think, these kind of three key consideration, price, scalability, and how much customization can be done were actually key factors in terms of helping us decide which partner to go with. And then just as a disclaimer, actually, we use both GetResponse for our email services as well as NetSuite, so just putting it out there.
There are an audience here, right? You can't just have these nice little conversations.
Well, that's true. I'll walk the talk.
So just on that particular point, right? So, you do your research, and one of the concerns that people do have around going into the cloud is, sure, you can increase the scalability of whatever you might need from a user or a license perspective, but you can't ratchet down when you need to. Jan, does that apply to you?
Well, actually, that's for true cloud companies. You should be able to scale up and scale down as you need, right? That's one of the main value propositions of a cloud vendor, right? To be able to pay for what you need and scale when you need to. And in the unfortunate scenario that you need to scale down, that you should have that flexibility as well. So I think and that's kind of what we're cloud vendors try to be, right? We try to be seen as a good partner for your business, and in the like it's like a marriage, right? So in the good times and the bad, we should be there to support you.
I don't know how to respond to that. Look, a couple more points that I just wanted to cover. One is trying to think about the type of advice you might give to anyone in the audience going into a conversation in and around clouds, seeking to actually engage with a cloud provider. But before we get to that, I just wanted to talk about the opportunity is obvious. The imminency of that opportunity is also obvious. What I really wanted to get a sense for was how does this conversation about cloud grow? Or is it just going to be a thing that we just all use going forward? So to the jungle point, to the jungle data set that was talked about earlier, 78% of all SME businesses in Southeast Asia will be on the cloud in 2020, and that makes up 95% of all businesses, etc. So it's a question of what's next. Jan, any views?
Well, I think over time, I think cloud will just be like the default way of doing things, right? It's going to be the we'd like to call it the last great computing architecture, right? So where everything is managed, everything is automatically upgraded, everything just works, and you plug into the network, and you should get the services that you need. Now, over time, there might be like specific scenarios or specific industries, specific use cases, specific regulation that might prevent certain businesses from going all in on the cloud. But I think over time, it'll be just how we do computing in the future. It'll be the default way of computing.
So, Leon, imagine you're a big brother of someone who's just about to walk into the cloud conversation. What is your one bit of advice, your brotherly advice to someone entering and about to buy and about to get neck deep into putting their app or their product into the cloud?
I think I can tie this into a very kind of specific mobility angle, because we live in an age where every single car moving forward is going to be connected to the cloud.
Sure.
Right? Whether it's you buy a car from Mercedes or BMW, it comes pre-configured, connected to the cloud, and all the data is actually being shared. And I think security is a rightful concern for many individuals because in the future, I can actually control any single car. If I can hack into the central cloud, switch on your engine, switch it off while you're driving, and it's a pretty scary reality, right? Pretty similar to, watching one of those episodes of like CSI, Cyber or something where someone hacks into your car and creates like a massive accident. So I'd say the economic benefits are clear, but, really consider what it means in terms of security, especially when it comes to the business you're in, because ultimately we want to keep everyone safe.
Look, on that note, we're going to wrap it up. Can you please join me in thanking our panelists, Jan, Leon, Mellissa.
And ladies and gentlemen, another nice warm round of applause for your moderator consulting partner at PwC, Michael Graham. Thank you, Michael.